We go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Just YA Author Talks with Sarah. And we are visiting with each of the authors who contributed generously and compassionately a piece to the Open Education Research Resource Project, Just YA, through Oklahoma State University. And today, Padma has agreed to carve some time in her busy schedule to sit with us, teachers, students, and talk a little bit about her piece. So Padma, will you just introduce yourself, say a little bit about where you are in the world?
Of course. Namaste and hello to all of you. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to be part of this. I am joining you today from Narragansett, Rhode Island, which is in fact the traditional stopping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic Nation as well. And I could tell you a whole lot about all of my previous 5 books, but I'm just going to hold this up, Sarah, because I don't think I've shared it with anyone before. But here is the galley proof of my latest novel, Safe Harbor, which is a novel in verse, and it's coming out in January.
I'm so excited. I did not know that you had this new one coming out. Okay, well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Can you say, since you held it up, say a little bit about that book so we know.
Sure. So Safe Harbor, as you can see, it's pink and turquoise. It's for a younger age group than my previous novels. So it's sort of upper elementary. I would say, even a 7-year-old could read it, but 8 to 11, grades 3 to 6. And it stems from my oceanography background. As you know, Sarah, I was the only BIPOC female in my incoming class in oceanography a very long time ago. But this has some very strong BIPOC females as oceanographers. And it's about a girl who loves Indian classical music like I do. She plays the flute. She's an immigrant like I am, has just moved to America. And as she is walking along a beach in Rhode Island, where I live, she comes across a stranded baby seal. Yeah.
And then we learn what
and then you'll have to, yes.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. I love that you write for such a wide range. I was actually just noticing your book, A Time to Dance is Right that we're looking at in our class here at OSU. Well, can you say just a little bit about like how you became involved in this Open Education Research Project for Just YA?
So the first thing that may not be terribly professional, but it's just that I saw your email, Sarah, and I get a mountain of email, but when I see your name, then I open it. And I have just been such an admirer of everything that you do on the front lines, bringing work to readers. And I wanted to do whatever I can to support all your efforts, always. And when you wrote to me about this, I thought what an important thing it is, right? So as scientists, there is more and more open access stuff that's going on. With a writer, it's really hard because we don't get paid very much at all as authors for our work. So it's always this sort of a bit of a tussle. But I did want to contribute to it, in part because when I was growing up, I was not a wealthy kid at all. In fact, quite the opposite. And so my mother struggled to put food on the table and all the rest of it. So I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, this is something I want to be part of. And this particular story, her story, was already one that had a Creative Commons license. Because someone else had acquired it for another project. And I thought, okay, then you know what, this is something that I could use in this way. And I think I love this short story. If I'm allowed to love my own work, I do. I really love it because among other things, the voice for me was just there. Like sometimes I have to work a little to find that voice, but this one just sort of came and just poured itself out on the page. And I also love the fact in retrospect that the voice is quite unusual. So it is we, and there are not a lot of books that use the sort of that address, if you will, the sort of third person, not third person, the first person plural. You have a lot of books that are you do not have the we so often, and this is a we for a very important reason. I mean, it alternates obviously between the we and the I here, It's not like Hemingway's famous story, which is all we the whole time. But I also found that such an interesting voice later on, like I said, in retrospect.
Thank you so much for talking about that. I know you are an author that likes to experiment with point of view, and like The Bridge Home was told in second person. Is that right?
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's really great for our student writers and teachers to see books told in different points of view instead of always limiting it to like first or third. Like there's other options and there's reasons why. And I think your work explains or offers how that is a craft move, that is an intentional decision to do something interesting with the story. So I love that. Well, will you read a little bit of her story for us?
Of course.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll talk a little bit afterwards too, right? So
Great.
I won't tell you what it's about. I'll just read the story now. Her Story by Padma Venkatraman. We strolled into the cafeteria together. We knew who the sharks were and how to avoid them. We knew exactly where they basked in the afternoon sunshine, waiting to sink their teeth into some poor fish's flesh. We grabbed trays and plastic packets of ketchup and bruised green apples. We watched the lunch lady fling clumps of brown gravy on scoops of mashed potatoes. Our plates filled, we flitted away to the table in the far corner, like fish schooling in a hidden grotto where they're safe to indulge in their own small freezing frenzy. Oops, sorry. Let me do that again. I don't know if you can edit, but I hope you can. Our plates filled, we flitted away to the table in the far corner like fish schooling in a hidden grotto where they're safe to indulge in their own small feeding frenzy. We knew there was safety in numbers, the three of us. We'd played together and laughed together since second grade. We'd stood side by side for hours to sell Girl Scout cookies. We'd run against each other at cross-country meets. Sure, we'd squabble every now and then, but we knew we belonged to the same species, although our families were so different. Catrice, whose doctor parents came from Eritrea, Laurel, whose dad is a pastor and whose family has lived here for who knows how long, and me, Sandhya, who prefers to go by Sandy because it blends in and it matches my beige skin, which I inherited half from my history professor mom, who came to the States with her parents when she was 5, and half from my father's Irish ancestors, who probably immigrated during the potato famine. I saw the new girl at the end of the lunch line that curled like a scraggly piece of seaweed drying on the beach. It wasn't just the baggy, brightly colored salwar kameez she was wearing that made her stick out so badly. It was also the coconut scent of her. Oops, sorry, I have to do that again. I'm not very good at reading out my own work. It was also the coconut oil scent, stronger, I felt, than the stale cheese odor that permeated the cafeteria, wafting off her gleaming black hair, which she wore in a tight braid. And most of all, the bright red bindi on her forehead, exactly like the one my mother insists I paint between my eyebrows on the rare occasions when we visit the temple. We all saw her eyes dart to our table in the lunchroom. I know we all did, because at once, the three of us fell silent. We had space for her at our table. We knew she could see that we had space, but we met one another's eyes, not hers, and we stiffened like criminals in the shadows trying to escape her searchlight gaze until we sensed her gaze had passed over us. Then our relief tumbled into mindless chatter, mixing easily with the clatter of the not-so-silverware, the clickety-clack of plastic, the thudding trays, the shouts of laughter, and the echoing waves of noise. At the dim edge of our horizon, she was visible, sitting alone at a table by the window, bathed in a golden rectangle of sunshine.
Beautiful, Padma. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not editing this at all, but I do think it's important for teachers and students to hear authors, teachers, like how we reread and recorrect, we just
Yeah.
do it again and then it keeps going. And this is just part of the fluency, part of rereading is what people do. It's
Yes.
perfect, right? Um,
Yes.
okay, as you're rereading this again, because I knew, you've written it, you've shared it with me, what stands out to you?
I think one of the things I was just thinking about this morning earlier, I had a conversation with Stephen Bickmore. And one of the things that I love is poetry. It's something that I've always loved. It was the first thing that I started to write when I was a kid. And actually, I was showing him this book, which my mom had, in which she was writing down stuff when I was really tiny. And I was too young to write it down, but I told her I had a poem in my head and I would like dictate that. So when I was like 3 and 4 and 5, and so I think poetry is so important to me. It this particular piece of prose, and a lot of my prose actually is, I think, um, quite poetic because I love that. I think that lyrical sort of voice, not, I also love other voices that aren't necessarily lyrical, but I think a lot of times when I write, I see that lyricism and I love I was just talking about this Safe Harbor being my first novel, which is inspired by oceanography. And of course, this particular short story is aimed at a much older age group. It's aimed at a young adult age group. But I can see here that the oceanographer in me is coming out, in Sandhya, who is this girl who in my head is also, loves the ocean and all of it, although you don't see that on the page. A lot of times we imagine so much about our characters and some of it doesn't show up. But yet you can see that in the metaphors she uses, and which actually go through the whole short story.
Wow, I'm so glad that you pointed that out because I think, we will read this and I will read this opening scene and the sharks, right? And I think about the bullies that are in the cafeteria waiting for us or somebody in the hallway that I'm going to go a different direction because I don't want to be confronted by them. And that's what it means to me without having oceanography background or a love of being near water, right? But and that's okay. That's okay. I can interpret it that way, and our students can too. And then
And it is indeed
right,
that. I mean, it is also that all of the time. I just mean this, so it absolutely is that. In fact, that is the interpretation. So the shark there is not a real shark at all. It is indeed the sharks of human beings that are waiting to be really, to bully these kids.
yeah.
Because the we here, the three of them, are also in a sense outsiders, right? So they're not the sort of in crowd, the cool crowd in the cafeteria at all. They're afraid of the sharks, as it were, and they're not literal sharks. They're the metaphorical sharks of human beings. But I think it's interesting that I picked that particular metaphor, and I could see that it probably came from me being an oceanographer and being so sort of intimately involved with oceans.
Yeah. And I think that's when we write or we want our students to write to draw on the metaphors that we know that we live on a daily basis to think how they can live in a different way, in a figurative way. And I think, you read the first of 4 parts, 4 short parts to this. And, a little spoiler alert is that the we pronoun and perspective that you use here, it's a collective we.
Yes.
And the 3 girls in some ways take on some of the elements of the sharks.
Yes, exactly.
And I think
that's beautifully put, Sarah. Beautifully observed and beautifully
put. It is I read this a couple times, but hearing you read it and hearing the tone of your voice and the seriousness of this, like it sounds more ominous when I hear it than it did when I first read it. And I think the rereadings are helpful. And that's what's beautiful of the short form, because you can do multiple readings and see how these beautiful symbols and metaphors work. But you have to get to the end to know that.
Yes.
Why the we matters and why the circling matters and why there's 3 girls, why like that, all of that is important. You have to get to the end of the story to find out why, which you can read for free because we'll put the link in the comments, right? Yeah. So it's such an important story. And I was just thinking about, we're going to begin a workshop about Holocaust and genocide education
Yeah.
soon. And I'm really thinking your short story might be one that we begin with.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you. That would be such an honor.
Great. Well, I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about other projects that you're doing as we kind of wrap up our time together. You are such an activist in so many ways, and the writing that you do and the books that you do are changing hearts and minds. But I know you're involved in a lot of other things too. You're so busy. Can you tell us about some of your projects?
Sure. So, some of the more sort of okay, one of the things that I think I definitely should talk about is Diverse Verse. And it is basically it's a blog that I started, but it has become a coalition of authors and poets and educators to some people. And so if you ever wanted to contribute, you're welcome, Sarah, or anyone else. But the idea with that is that I felt a special need to showcase BIPOC poets and poets who are LGBTQ, and make the poetry space more inclusive. Because even to this day, you find a lot of lovely novels in which, you'd see Dickinson being quoted as a poet or something. You hardly ever see the BIPOC poets getting sort of recognition that they deserve, I think. They're a little bit sidelined. And so I think I really wanted to pull that in and say we need more representation in poetry and poetic spaces. So there's a lot of verse novel stuff in there, but also, activities, writing prompts for those who are watching and want to try it out and so on. So Diverse Verse is something that's a project that I am really, big on and involved in. And there are a lot of others, and I'm just seeing though that it's 1:30, so I probably shouldn't go on and on. I'll just say, stop there and say, please, anyone who's looking at this and is interested in more, visit my website. You just have to make sure that you spell the name correctly. It's www.padmavenkatraman.com. Padma, my first name, Venkatraman, my last name, all together. Spell it correctly, though. Padmavenkatraman.com. And then you'll find resources, teacher activities, a whole bunch of writing prompts, and also in interviews and articles and all that sort of thing, ways to connect with me, ways to invite me into your classrooms and so on.
Fantastic. Yes, I can put all those links in the comment section on the YouTube. So we'll be able to find you directly, this short story, your website, a link to your author page to find all the incredible other books. And I'll just say, like, every book that you have written, it has made its way into my hands, my shelves, my classrooms, the students that I encounter, and they love your work, and it's so precious to me and to the people that I share it with. So grateful for you, Padma, and your generosity.
Thank you. Thank you so
anything
much.
Else you want to say before we close?
No, but I think I might just hold up some of my other recent and favorite books. So here they are. I'm just going to do that before we climb the stairs, is where I started climbing the stairs as an author. A Time to Dance is the book that's behind you. The Bridge Home is probably my most best-selling book anyway. And Born Behind Bars is the one that came out before Safe Harbor. So I'm just going to do that and say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.